Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas on Tuesday, January the 6th. And welcome to our commentary. Welcome to our chat with our friend Mailyn Salabarria, our friend from Cuba, who has been on our show before. And we always talk about Cuba. Always enjoy, in particular, chatting with Mailyn because of her background. I always love talking to Cubans, but I specifically love talking to Cubans who had a different experience than I did. So many of the people that I got to know over the years in the United States were Cubans who came here like I did when we were kids, and we grew up in the United States. Our parents took us out of the country. But Mylene has a different experience, and one that I really value because she's a lot closer to the country that exists in Cuba right now than I am, simply because of our experience. So, Mylene, Happy New Year, and it's a great honor to have you. Welcome.
Thank you for having me again, Silvio. It's really always a pleasure to come and talk to you here. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year for everybody too. And I know that I might sound like a broken record, but Silvio, what a time to be alive. I cannot believe that we are going to sit down here and discuss what has happened since Friday evening.
No, you're right. We are living in crazy times, good times, I think, good changes, and we're hoping for more. We're hoping for more. Well, I want to begin with something a little bit off the topic, but January the 6th, of course, is uh, for many of us who grew up in the traditional Catholic Christmas, this was the day that the wise men showed up with gifts. And I remember as a little boy in Cuba that. We would actually write letters to the three wise men. We didn't really have any contact with Santa Claus, and in fact, that's the way it was. Of course, that was a different Cuba. I know that was a different Cuba. That was in the early '60s, so there was still a little bit of that left in Cuba because my family left in 1964. So obviously, a lot changed after that. But do you have any memories or recollections, or do they even practice
No,
January
no,
6th
my
anymore,
generation,
Marlene?
Silvio. No, by the time that I was born, all that was already censored. All that was completely eliminated. You get all my childhood in Cuba was getting three toys. On in the same rationing book that they used to give us the mere rations in the food in the bodegas or like the grocery stores, three toys that our parents had to get tickets and they had to stand in lines in the stores like almost like a week before. And obviously, the date was changed. The toys were not given on the day where the Feast of the Epiphany would fall, which is, the Catholic origin of the celebration. The revolution and the party changed it to a completely different date. I mean, if you ask me right now, I don't even remember, but I know it was not in Christmas because I didn't have neither. I didn't have much of the Three Kings Day or Wise Men, and I didn't have much of Christmas at all either. You have to remember, I am the generation that was born and raised in Cuba when Christmas trees were forbidden. You could go to jail or
Right.
be denounced and reported with the political police if they see you doing any type of celebration or Christmas trees or anything associated with the entire period of the Christmas celebration due to, the Christian Catholic religious origin of that holiday.
Right, and that is such a sad thing because that was such a part of Cuban traditions. We celebrated Noche Buena on the 24th of December, and that was usually a big meal. And then the next day, of course, Christmas. In our
Same with that
particular
one. Yeah, the
case, we had
Nochebuena, the
a
Nochebuena, it was impossible for them. It was impossible for the party to eliminate that one. But like the whole idea of the
right.
celebration of the three kings, the three wise men's Christmas, and all that stuff had already disappeared and was completely gone in Cuba by the time that I was born. So it was different. Whatever
Right.
we learned, in my case, whatever I learned, it was just more like family tradition and information from my grandma and whatever little tradition you kept in the house, but you had to keep it inside the house and kind of quiet,
Right.
because you have the committees for the defense of the revolution watching every move in the neighborhood, and they were and still are very easy to rat you out with the political police if they see you doing or saying something that it was not allowed or within anything that was already censored or forbidden by the party. So it was, it was like almost nothing for me growing up in Cuba.
Yeah. It
It's
was
funny
not. It
that you
was not
mention
any
it.
fun.
Yeah, it's
No, go
funny
ahead.
that you
Yeah.
mention it, because my kids here, I raised them in the same traditions that we have in Cuba you had when you were a kid before you left, and we always celebrate the January 6th, the Three Kings Day, the Three Wise Men. And my daughter, my youngest one, she's now a preteen, just out of the blue, struck out this conversation the other day. It's like, Mom, we were talking about all the seasons and all the celebrations related to Christmas in a school and in Sunday church school too. Everything that had to do with the history of the celebration of the Epiphany. We always watch movies since they were little that are around that time of the year. And she was like, Mom, the whole tradition started because we have to put the shoes outside the front door of the house, and we have to leave grass inside them or hay so the camels can eat. How come you always told me that I needed to put it inside my room and the shoes on under my bed, and we only put like little carrots and things like that? So now that she's older, I have to sit down with her and explain her all this tradition that I did when I was your age and when I was younger. It was things that my grandma told me how to do,
Right.
but it was back then, that time in Cuba, where it was forbidden. So I always remember that abuela would say, "Don't put the shoes out in the house, because if somebody sees us, we're gonna get in trouble." And it was like
Right.
our own family new tradition, like our own version of, oh, we're gonna put the shoes under the bed, and then, well, we don't have grass, we put whatever it is that we put in there for the camels. And my daughter was just looking at me and laughing, and she was like, Mom, is that why our Santas on Christmas eat guava pastries instead of cookies? And I'm like, yes, that's the
Right.
reason why too. Santa needs to know that he's coming to a Cuban house, so he's gonna have a whole
That's
different
right.
diet.
No, you're right, and it's such a nice memory. I can remember as a little boy, my father had an uncle, my grandmother's brother. So that would be, I guess I'm not sure, was it un tío? Yeah, un tío, right? And he was Tío Joaquin, and Tío Joaquin was married to Tia
Uncle,
Clara,
I don't know either.
and sorry,
Yeah, I don't
did I lose
know.
you?
No, I can
No,
hear
no, no.
you.
But I'm okay. Great. No, what I was saying is that my father's uncle, Tío Joaquin, taught at the university, and he had been a judge. And his wife, Tia Clara, Aunt Clara,
Mhm.
had lived in the United States for a while. So on December 25th, we would go to their house,
Mm.
and the excuse or the explanation was that Santa Claus would make a special trip to Cuba to take care of us. So we would go to my uncle's and my aunt house, and Tia Clara, who was really into the tradition a lot more than my uncle was, she would say, "Look, Santa Claus came last night, and he came here and he left you these gifts." We thought that was great, but Los Reyes Magos, sorry about that, I'm battling a little bit of the weather here, but it was Los Reyes Magos that really inspired us. So we were nice and courteous and took the gift from Aunt Clara, but it was really Los Reyes Magos because
The
I
big
remember
celebration. Well,
January the
yeah,
6th,
at least you
the big
got like the
celebration,
little
January 6th,
wave.
getting up in
Yeah,
the morning.
getting the toys. At least you got the little wave of it. In my case, like I said, by the time that I was born and I was, I don't know, 3 years old, which is kind of like the age that kids start getting really excited about it, it was all gone. So whatever we did when we were younger and little children in
Yeah.
Cuba, it was like I said, those little things that my grandmother tried to, do. She tried to come up with her own version of keeping the tradition within, the house, and without not many people knowing about it, so we
Right.
wouldn't get in trouble.
Right. No, and this was an amazing, and I've heard similar stories from other Cubans of your generation, but I know that I recently, about 10 or 12 years ago, we did a podcast, and four Cubans of my group, the ones who grew up here, we did a podcast, and we remembered the Reyes Magos and that tradition, and everybody had different stories. One of them was from Oriente, one of them was from Matanzas, the other one, like me, was from, well, at the time we were living in La Habana. At the end of our For most of the time I lived in Cuba, I lived in Havana, although I was not born in La Habana. But anyway, so all four of us shared that story, and it was even celebrated differently in different parts of Cuba. The one in Oriente, he was from Banes Oriente, which is that very very famous town. That's where Fidel Castro was born, and that they celebrated it a little bit different out there, but it was so neat. And I've always regarded this tradition of the three wise men, los Reyes Magos, as something that, I'll always remember it. So on a day like this, obviously we live here now, and my grandkids are not doing los Reyes Magos hoy, or today, because that's not what they celebrate. But we do have references to it. And I just think it was a
Absolutely. Yeah,
beautiful, an absolutely beautiful
it
tradition.
is.
And
It
I
is.
hope that in a future Cuba, it comes back in some fashion. Now, speaking
We,
of a
I hope
future
it
Cuba,
will. I
that's
hope
why I
it
want
will.
you to
In
talk
my house,
tonight.
we do the same. In my house, we do both.
I
We do
think,
like traditional American Christmas with Santa Claus, and we always keep the celebration of the Epiphany with the three wise men too. So
yeah, I want to apologize to the audience. I'm fighting a little bit of a cold here, and that's why I've got this little napkin with me, and why I mute myself when I'm coughing. So forgive me. But tell me, this situation in Venezuela, how is that going to impact Cuba, you think?
well, number one is, let's just talk about the
Or
reaction,
how do you
because
see
this
the
is kind of,
situation? Yeah.
it's kind of like bizarre. Everything that happened, since Friday evening, which is, listen to this coincidence. Friday evening, it was my mother's birthday, 83 years old. And we were doing like a little, surprise birthday party for her with all the
Wow.
grandkids and whatnot. And we just, how it is with the birthday parties. We sit down, we do the sobremesa, we overstayed our invitation hours and whatnot. So as we were doing that right before coming back home, mom was talking, and we were talking about Cuba. We were talking about how the situation is, like, everything that everybody knows, especially us Cuban Americans that still have family there. And mom was just saying, you know what, I'm kind of like losing hope that I'm ever going to be able to go back to Cuba or to see a change on the island. I'm turning 83 years old today. There is not a single sign that, that give me hope that I'm ever going to be able to see my homeland again, and blah blah blah. And we were kind of like, trying to divert her conversation so she wouldn't get sad or anything about it. Fast forward like 2.5 hours, and my phone is blowing off on social media, on the phone calls, on WhatsApp, on the messages. I am a very fortunate person, Silvio, that I have a huge group of friends spread it all over the world. But Cubans, Venezuelans, and a few other Latin Americans. And all of the sudden, my phone looked like a Christmas parade, literally, with people sending me the message. Venezuelans that I know that live in Europe, in Canada, in Panama, some others that are still in Venezuela. It was like insane, like for about 2 hours. And like I was telling you before we got into the studio, I don't think I have slept a whole night since then. It's like everybody is like in an adrenaline type of rush, because again, what a time to be alive. I never thought that we were going to see something like this happening, and especially happening the way that the military operation took place. I know we have been discussing for a while the whole trends of Latin America and doing a complete turnaround away from socialism, collectivism, corrupt big governments, all the elections, all the changes that we have had in the region. If you think about it, for the last year, maybe a little bit more. And we have been discussing all that. We have been discussing, the connections between Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, China, how the domino effect could, end up hitting those that are like the most crusty, the most tyrannical, and the most cruel collectivist tyrannies in the region. And all of a sudden, all this happens like in 2 hours, and I was in disbelief. I guess that's the best way that I have to put it. It took
Yeah,
me a
that was my
while to,
reaction too.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was
it
disbelief.
took
I
me a
couldn't
while
believe
to
it.
believe it.
So
It took me a
obviously,
while because I got up at 6. I found out about it at 6 o'clock in the morning. I wake up. My routine is I always check the iPhone to see the headlines, right? And I see the headline that Maduro and his wife are being flown out of Venezuela, and I'm go, wow. And the fact
oh
that
no, I
it went
didn't
so smooth.
sleep.
Well, no, but I see. I didn't know about it before. I was not up at midnight or 1 o'clock or whatever. So I found out as I woke up, and then I just said to myself, "Wow, this is incredible!" And the military operation was so smooth. Congratulations to the
It
troops for the
was
great job they
impressive.
did.
I actually
It
did
was
I did an interview. I think it was yesterday or the day before, and that was exactly the first thing that we were talking about when I was being asked my reaction. And I, like, again, I know that for almost a year we have been discussing that, like, all this trend, and a lot of people have asked that question before. And I remember always saying, well, I hope that whatever happened, whether it's with Venezuela, because I knew there was already naval military movement in the Caribbean and whatnot, everybody was always saying, we hope it's going to be something like Panama, when, it was a very similar situation when Noriega was arrested and whatnot. But what happened 2 days ago, it was like a really, like, the most professional demonstration of the effectiveness of the United States military, in the way that in a couple of 2 hours, those special forces executed like a surgically perfect operation, right on target. And it was in and out. By the time the Venezuelan army and all those commies, plus all the Cubans infiltrated everywhere in there, by the time they opened their eyes and they realized what was going on, everybody was already probably flying over Florida, if not. So it was like really, really impressive. And like I said the other day, I want to, in every opportunity that I have, extend my gratitude to the American military and to the men and women in our armed forces, because even though I am not Venezuelan, we Cubans are in a predicament that is 10 times worse. And we really appreciate their sacrifice. We really appreciate what they did. And obviously, we're extremely
right.
grateful
Well,
that there were
I think
no
I'm
casualties and they were
yeah.
able to complete their mission and come back home to their families.
Right. No, no, you're exactly right. And I know exactly how you feel because that's exactly the way I felt. But here's the question that, everybody's talking now, of course, about the impact on Cuba. And I think it will have an impact on Cuba. I think President Trump is correct that Cuba is probably going to fall apart on its own, simply because I don't know how it stays. I mean, I don't know how in the world it stays up. I mean, it's like it's been what do they call a failed society for so long, and
Mhm.
now there's no. I mean, they don't even have oil now.
The
So,
pipeline, it stayed in place, Silvio, because
right,
they were leashing out the pipeline of oil and resources from Venezuela, and they were acting as the mandatory layover in the Caribbean for all the drug trafficking and
right,
all the black market operations that the Venezuelan government was doing to divert the sanctions, all in working together with China and Iran. That's the
right,
only thing that has kept the Cuban dictatorship afloat in the last 20 years. Now that pipeline was completely cut off, exactly the same way that the the pipelines of subsidies from Moscow fell down back when the Berlin Wall fell and the Soviet Union collapsed. It's just that now the situation on the ground in Cuba, it's probably three or if not more times worse than what it was back then. I was still in Cuba when that
Right. Yeah,
happened in
you remember that
1991.
they call it this.
I do
This
remember that. It was on my very first years going to college in law school. So I do remember very well and very detailed how it
I
was
think they
during the
called it the
so-called
special
the
special
special
period.
period.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the difference now, Silvio, is that the Cuba that was hit with that sudden cut off of supplies back in 1991 is not the Cuba that we have right now. The Cuba that we have right now, you have to imagine it. I don't even know how to explain it in English in a way that makes sense, honestly. It is a country that beyond the infrastructure that we know that everything is falling apart, it is a country that is disintegrating at the society level. The human capital of the nation is so fractured that is almost gone. And then
Right.
the entire vicious cycle is that this military junta and these communists in the party, they keep clinging to power and they keep managing, quote unquote, and controlling the island and the population that is left in there exactly as if they were a plantation, a slave plantation. I mean, you have to think
Right.
about it. The island, geographically speaking, Cuba, it's a natural prison. That's the difference with even Venezuela and every other socially failed state that we have in Latin America. Cuba do not have land borders. And I think that that's one of the main reasons why the tyranny has stayed in power the way they have for so long, because we
Right.
have no way to receive help from anybody or to exchange information of anything. So that goes back
Well,
to the case or the fact that it makes the really, really bad situation in the country right now, it makes it worse, because the same way that the government doesn't have the pipeline to continue the drug trafficking, the oil trafficking and all that, now they're going to be cut off and they're not going to have any type of humanitarian aid either. So it's going to be really like ground zero, I guess is the word
right.
that you
Well,
say it.
it's
It's gonna
gonna
be
be
ground zero.
it's gonna be like a hell, really. I mean, if I can pardon the language, but it's gonna be like hell on earth because there's nothing comparable to what Cuba is going through and will be going through here in the next few months. But here's what worries me about. I think a change is coming. I really do. It cannot continue. I mean, it's one of
I
those things
agree.
where
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I hate to put it this way because it's kind of a. I hope no one's offended by my comparison, but it's almost like Cuba is in hospice. You understand? Like
It,
when
it is. Yeah,
a
it is.
patient
Yeah,
goes in,
it
yeah,
is.
and when a
Mhm.
person goes into hospice, it's only a matter of time,
It's
you
only a
know.
matter of
And
time.
normally, what
Yeah.
happens? Yeah, and normally, and I, you know, I remember this with family members that they're in hospice, and all of a sudden their whole body just starts collapsing. Right? I mean, the
Even
whole
and
all
give
the
up.
and
Yeah.
and they and yeah, and I think that that's what's going to happen. But what worries me now is who's going to take. I mean, who's going to take over? Because the problem is that there's nobody in Cuba right now that has the credibility to really govern. Because I mean, the Cubans are so opposed to this regime. I do believe that it's not like, you know, I don't know who in the world would say, okay, follow me now.
Yeah,
There may be
the situation in Cuba in that sense is a little bit more dicey, and it's something that we, especially now with everything that is happening in Venezuela, we can actually do a very easy comparison. Cuba, the whole transition and the change is coming. I mean, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. Now, the second phase of what comes next, of what's going to happen after, I think it has a couple of layers that we could discuss. Number one is that even though the 8-9 millions of Cubans that are trapped in the island, like you said, are in hospice as a way to explain it, and they know that they are being systematically killed or driven into die by the state policies for the last 67 years, they also know that they want to change. They also know that if there is no change in the country, if there is not an opening that the government and the Castro family finally leave or gets killed or prosecuted or in jail or whatever, they know they're not going to make it no matter what. So that's kind of like the part from people that are in Cuba right now, as you and I are sitting here speaking. The other layer of that we can use the comparison with Venezuela is, which is the negative point for Cuba, and is in detrimental of our, our pursuit of change in the island and the opening to a rebuilding the country in a free and democratic society, is that in Cuba we don't have an organized opposition with a clear plan and a clear leadership like Venezuela has, and that is going to be a major challenge. A
Right.
major challenge in groups of political activists, communicators, people like us that kind of like overlap in the United States and other countries outside Cuba, always advocating for freedom, advocating for the end of the tyranny, for the political prisoners, and all that is something that has been at top of the conversations for a very long time now. It's like it's very fractured. You have groups everywhere. They come out and they do their activities, their events or whatever, but no, they tell you, oh, we have a plan, but nobody chose the plan. And not even for us, you and I or whoever is advocating to help Cuba achieve their freedom from outside of Cuba. That is not a priority for us because we already live in freedom. But the Cuban that is
Right.
inside the island is tired of babysitting stories, is tired of seeing the opposition and the dissident fracture. And then on top of that, when somebody comes and says something, they say, oh yeah, we have the people, we have the team, we have the plan, but nobody chose them the plan. No, there's not an
Right.
outline.
Right.
It's when you think about it, it's like when you're launching a business. If you want to get funding approved, you need to show a business plan. If you want to galvanize the Cuban population that is dying of misery and repression in the island right now, you need to show them a plan because they might be dying of hungers, but they have the same human rights and the same ability and capacity to analyze and discuss and negotiate and debate what they want as you and I do. So I think that's a big problem with it. To be fair, I don't blame it completely on the opposition movement in Cuba. I think that the situation of the dissidents and the opposition movement in Cuba right now, and well, basically for the 67 years that the communist dictatorship have been in power, it's not a coincidence. It's by design. And it's by design because that's the way that the Cuba State Police, the intelligentsia, and all this state security, which is a carbon copy of the handbooks of the Stasi and the KGB, they have been doing that on purpose because they know it's the good old divide and conquer. The more they fracture the opposition,
Right.
the longer they can quell any type of revolt, any type of riot, any type of dissidence. They throw you in prison, that your family doesn't know where you are until 6 months. They kill you. They took you to the firing squad without a trial, and all that. All those little components are part of the reason why, number one, the tyranny is still in power, and number two, why in Cuba, as opposed to Venezuela, we don't have an organic and unified opposition and dissident movement. And it's very lamentable to be, to
No, it
be
is.
honest.
Now, let me just throw out an idea. Let's go back to 1898. You remember the Spanish American War?
Yep.
Uh,
Mhm.
there wasn't. I mean, you don't remember it, but you've read about it, of course.
Yeah, I
And
studied it. I know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of the critical moments in Cuban history. And from 1898 to 1902, Cuba was, in essence, an American territory,
A special
uh,
territory. Yeah.
a
Mhm.
special territory, and that the American presence create filled the vacuum of leadership that there, because there was not much better back then. And
Yeah.
then you had the United States filling that void. It allowed for investment to come into the country. It prepared the country for elections. And then in 1902, May 20th, 1902, as I'm sure you remember reading about it
We have
too.
the First Republic. Yeah. Mhm. So
Yeah.
I
And so
think,
during that 4 years, and even though, I mean, look, I'm not saying that's a perfect solution, but you do have a couple of very interesting people in this mix right now. One is President Trump, who I do think it would be committed to a new Cuba. And then guess who is the Secretary of State? The
I
son
know, our
of
Cubanito
Cuba.
boy from Miami.
Right. I mean, yeah, the Secretary of State is a Cuban born in Miami of Cuban parents and Cuban grandparents. I mean, the story maybe couldn't have been written any better if you think about it. Now, I'm not saying that
Yes, absolutely.
Rubio is going to be the governor of Cuba. I don't think that would be the way it works. But I do think that there is something. There's an opportunity here where Trump could actually say, "Look, we're going to make sure that you get investment. We're going to encourage companies." And then there's another important factor, Mylene, and that's you and me,
Mhm.
people in the United States like you and me.
The
Look, if
diaspora that is outside Cuba,
yes,
yes.
and it's a pretty successful one too. I mean, Cuban immigrants in the United States have done well. I can see, I can see a situation where not. First of all, the number of tourists is going to be incredible, but I can see the hotels, the infrastructure coming back. So I'm optimistic about this. Is a little bit like riding through a storm, and it's going to end. It's you know what I mean.
You
You
just
look
have
at
to
the
stay alive. You have to stay
yes,
alive until the end. And let me tell
and
you,
and you
because
hope that there's not a lot of killing because many of these groups in
exactly,
Cuba.
exactly. And that's the
But I
priority
don't
number
see.
one. Yes.
But I don't see Diaz Canel doesn't have that authority, doesn't have the credibility. Raúl Castro doesn't have the credibility. So none of these people from the old regime, Partido Comunista, the
They
Communist
all
Party,
need
none of
to
those.
be put in jail. They all need to be
Right,
prosecuted and put in jail. They all need to receive the same Delta Force Uber visit that Maduro received 2 days ago. And since you are in the topic of throwing monkey wrenches in this whole debate of foreign policy, let me tell you that even though we're different generations that came from Cuba and have the similar origin, that's exactly what I have been saying for quite a while now. And trust me, the very first times that I was just like, okay, allow me to elaborate in this possibility. Let's, unpack it and discuss it. And it's the possibility of doing a scenario very similar back to 1902 when the first republic, when the first constitutional republic was founded in Cuba. And it's exactly that. It is back then, if you think about it, with Los Mambises and after the war against the Spanish colonies and all that, Cuba was in a very, very similar situation regarding, the disintegration of the society, the poverty, the crumbling infrastructure, the corruption, the violence. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years, but the situation was pretty similar to what we have today. So even
right,
though a lot of people don't like it, and even inside Cuba, you still have like this very, this wave of nationalism that, they want to do it and this and that, but it's like, man, if you're dead, you're not going to be able to do it. So, put the arrogance, tone it down a little bit, accept the help, at least try, temporary during a transition process. And then from there, you can, number one, eat, recover your
right.
strength, put your plan out, and then you gather your people in the island and we start working to bring Cuba back to something better of what it has been in the last 67 years. And it's exactly that. It is some sort of policy, even if it's temporary. I don't know about, I'm not going to bore you with details, but essentially something that turns Cuba into a special territory or a protectorate of the United States in a way
Right.
that a group with and a country and a nation with resources and credibility can jump in right away in order to literally fill the stores with food, rebuild the hospitals and take care of the sick and the children and the people that are dying, open the credits with the rest of the world so investors can see that there is a temporary legal framework that is going to be the first step to have the legal guarantees to their investments. There's so many things, like the way that you do all the ships and all the cargo that go into the island. It's literally a business plan, but at a country level. Cuba today don't have the people, don't have the resources, don't have the information, and basically don't have the human strength to do that by themselves. If you add to that, the situation that we previously discussed, that we don't have a solid, consolidated, and unified opposition that has a plan, as opposed to, in contrast with Venezuela, for example. Yes, the type of help that Cuba needs for a transition requires something more blunt. And in foreign policy and thinking into the history of the region and what has worked in the past, included in Cuba, in my opinion, very unsolicited and probably very unpopular with a lot of people, is exactly that. It has to be turned into a special territory or a protectorate, and it's going to take a while. It's not going to be a year or two. The way that Cuba is
No.
today, Silvio, is going to
Oh,
take a good decade and a lot of investment and a lot of work to rebuild. But
but I
in
think
my
that
opinion,
there's
that's the only way that we can bring the
right.
dead corpse out of that hospice that you were mentioning before, and at least put it into the ICU, where at least
Right.
we can bring them back to conscious and start nursing them back to health.
Right. And I've always felt that there's three things that Cuba has to do after a change. The first thing is, well, there has to be a leader that both sides trust, and that's hard, but maybe not as hard as it sounds, because these people tend to come up in history. I mean, there's always people like that who come up. I remember the situation in Poland with the union leader who led the union movement that eventually, uh, you know, I was trying to remember the fellow's name, but you know who I'm talking about. In Poland, the
Yes,
union
yes,
leader.
and I know the phenomenon. Like you
So
said, when there
yeah,
is a
so that
transition
would
and a
be number
process of
one. There
change
has to
already in place, you have people that will come up and they will take
right,
over the
and
lead
they
in,
will
in
take over, and
for
they
a
have to
little
be
while.
people of good faith who have the support of both sides, or at least they're trusted. The second thing that has to happen, and I've always felt this is very important, there has to be a reconciliation of the Cuban family. And what I mean by that, I'm not saying, I'm simply saying that one of the, let me put it this way, one of the things that the communists have done is they've divided people, and the Cuban family has been devastated, divided, which is
Yes,
abnormal because Cuba was always a country with very strong families. They've destroyed all of that. The uncle who stayed behind, who was a comunista, and who that kind of thing, those feelings. So you have to reconcile the family, and then number three, of course, you have to do something about the economy. But the good news there, I think, Mylene, the good news with the Cuban economy is that it's relatively small. So we're not talking here about a major Marshall Plan project for Europe
exactly.
after
Yeah,
World War II. I
that's
mean,
true.
remember that. I mean, we're talking about a. I mean, I read one time that the GDP of Cuba was the size of Waco, Texas. Okay, and Waco, Texas is a kind of a city of about 200,000 people. Now, some of that is because of the poverty, but still, you could very well have strong leadership on the part of the United States that encourages investment. You can have some laws that encourage investment in Cuba, and I think they would come. The debt that Cuba has with other countries can be renegotiated, and Trump could do that very easily, honestly. And I think that's the key. I mean, but the idea that Cuba, it becomes a territory of the United States, that becomes a I don't I think that's the only way to
I
go.
think it's the only way, Silvio.
The
I
only
know
way to
that a
go.
lot of people don't like that we say out loud this out loud, but like I said, the situation in Cuba, it's so way beyond hospice, to keep using the image of a dying
Right.
patient, that's the only way. Because when we think about it, yes, the infrastructure reconstruction, the investment, the renegotiation of the financials of the country, the banking industry, that's the easy part. Like you just said, there is like nearly 3 millions of us Cuban exiles all over the world that are part of this diaspora, very successful people that we all know we're gonna be involved in helping, but that's not
At
the
the
first
very
step.
least,
And I think that
Maylene,
that's why a strong guidance and help from the United States is going to be crucial at first, because you need to establish a rule of law. You need to not only going through the reconciliation process with the family, Silvio, you need to go into a judicial reconciliation, where
right,
all the murderers and all the torturers that for more than 160 years have been killing Cubans face justice the way that it happens, in normal societies, where the companies and the businesses that were expropriated and now are, benefiting and profiting from it, and all that money goes to the government and the party. All that need to be discussed, and all that need to be fixed literally in the judicial system. All the money that the Castro family and all the military junta has stole from Cuba in these 67 years, that is in banks in Switzerland and all over the world, that money could be the down payment to start renegotiating the country's debt and putting the island in a financial situation where, again, companies and investors feel that there is, a somehow decent legal framework for them to run the risks. But all those things have to be done relatively fast, most of them parallel at the same time, on top of preparing the Cuban population to have free elections and probably una constituyente, because we're going to have to rewrite the constitution of the island. So yes, when we start dissecting all the things that need to happen, like for yesterday, at the same time, there is no way that the fractured dissidents in Cuba and the average Cuban Joe that is literally dying of hunger right now can do that without the help of a strong plan that is supported from the United States. I mean, hate me if you want, everybody out there listening this, but we can be principled, we can be proud of who we are, but we also need to land on planet Earth, and every foreign policy needs to have a dose of reality where we are able to analyze which are the things and the steps that need to be taken for this ideal of freedom and democracy to actually become a reality. Because
well, I think
if we keep dreaming with things that are not going to happen, then nothing is going to change.
Right. Well, all I can tell you is that there is a history that happened one time, and that was
exactly
100 years ago. Well, more than 100 years ago, from
more,
1898
that's right.
to
I need to fix my
1902.
math.
And no, but I mean, the example is there. And I think Cubans today are so disgusted with the situation they have that they would be a lot more open to working with the United States, I think, than maybe even back then. So I just want you to make me a promise that you're going to come back and review this situation, because I think I will have you back soon. And
I think that we're gonna have to have something on standby. I know for some people, especially those that are not Cubans or Latinos, they might think that it's a cruel joke. But I always preface saying that we have been as a society and individuals, we have been so beaten and broken down by communism all these years that we joke about our own misery as a coping mechanism. And the other joke that is going around now is that you saw that the Delta Force took Maduro and Cilia out of Venezuela in 2 hours. Don't worry, the minute you send one into Havana, you're going to be all done in 25 minutes.
Right.
And
It's a closer flight. It's a closer flight.
But not only the closer flight, Silvio, who is going to oppose to anything that the special forces of the United States do in Cuba in a surgical operation like they did in Venezuela? I mean, even their own soldiers are like walking corpses in their military fatigues. So whatever took in Venezuela 2 hours, in Cuba we can get it done probably in 20 minutes. I'm pretty sure.
Right, and I think that I mean, Trump was right the other day when he said it's all falling apart and it's just going to fall on its own. And I think he's right about that. So promise me, I know you're a very busy lady and you do a lot of interviews. So promise me that at some time in the future, you'll accept my interview. I hope I feel better. I think I will.
Of course, yeah.
I've been battling this horrible cold here for the last couple of days, but I didn't want to reschedule.
It's going around. It's going around.
I didn't want to I didn't want to reschedule it because it's such a timely topic. But anyway, promise me that you're going to come back. But I will tell you, I have and all you got to do is call me and say, let's do it, and we'll do it. I mean, as I say, you have an open invitation, but look, I have a post tomorrow. I think I mentioned that I have a post tomorrow, and remembering those early years in the United States, when Cubans would have a bottle of wine in the closet or in the kitchen, and that was supposed to be opened on the day that Castro
The day
fell.
that Castro left,
Yeah,
or
and then there was some
yeah,
had a bottle of champagne, and there was a comedian Alvaro Guedes who made a comedy one time about El Dia que se caiga, just stuff like that. We used to talk about this all the time when I
it's
was growing up,
I
and
think it's part of our mindset as Cuban exiles and
right,
refugees now. And I wanted before before we disconnect and part ways, I wanted to kind of like add like a layer of hope into everything that we discuss. I mean, after all, we just threw the monkey wrench of a protectorate or special territory of the United States. But even in that case, I'm banking back into the precedent that you were mentioning when the republic was first founded in Cuba. I still hope that this domino effect that President Trump and Secretary Marco Rubio were mentioning in these few days after Venezuela gets cut off, that Cuba is going to implode on its own. I truly hope that it's going to be something very similar to what Batista did, that the Castro family is going to find a way to escape, or they're going to be arrested, that there is not going to be, a bloodbath or anything like that.
no,
I
nobody
truly
wants that.
hope that is going to be something like that. Nobody wants that. Like I said, the entire Cuban population is already dying of hunger with only
Right,
2 hours of electricity, trash and diseases everywhere, and no water. They definitely do not need an armed conflict or something that is going to trigger violence in a population that is already on life support. So I truly
right,
hope that something similar to what happened in 1959 is going to happen. And then that would be like the golden opportunity for a plan from the United States with the assistance of the current administration, and obviously Secretary Rubio, to implement something like what we have mentioned here. That
right,
would be the first step of the reconstruction of the island, and it would be the first step to give Cubans the opportunity to actually learn what freedom and democracy is. Because if you think
right.
about it, we're talking now about several generations that do not know
Oh yeah.
what freedom to choose is.
No, I agree. I mean, they've destroyed the Cuban person. I mean, you and I are lucky that we got out,
Yeah,
but
there is
the
no
ones who
human
stayed,
capital. The human
no, there
capital of the
isn't.
Cuban society is destroyed, is completely
It is.
destroyed.
It's absolutely incredible, and this is hard to explain to people because it's such a unique situation in Cuba. But one thing I will tell you that I write in this post that I have tomorrow. I hope you see it, but I have a post tomorrow at American Thinker where I say that uh, both of my parents have now passed away, and I said to my parents, I said to them that I would never go back to Cuba until there was a change. I promised them that. I said, no, I'm not going back. I'm not going to give a dime, a dollar to these ladrones, these thieves. Okay.
Likewise. Yeah.
Uh, and so I never went back. But if I do go back, and I mentioned this in the article, someday I will. Let me tell you what I want to see more than anything else. I used to see all these photos of Ciego de Ávila and Sabola Grande, Parque Martí. Actually, I went so it's not a photo. I was actually there as a boy. I want to see. There you go. There you came back. All right. Okay. I don't know how much we lost, but let me just kind of quickly repeat what I said in the post. Number one, I promised my parents that I would never go back until there was a change, and I kept that promise. But I will go back if there's a change. And I want to see. First of all, I want to see the church they got married in. I want to see that church in Ciego de Avila. I want to see that. Um, and I want to see there's several places that they would talk to me about. There's our great grandfather had this little farm outside of Sabana Grande, and in that little farm there was a little lake, and he called it Laguna Canto. That was the name of it that he called it. So we grew up hearing about Laguna Canto, and in fact, there's a photo of one of my uncles in his well, the young woman who eventually became my aunt, and they have a picture in front of this Laguna Canto. And
Oh, that's funny.
I've told my sons about this, that there is a little lake. I mean, little lake, nothing,
With your name on it.
yeah, un pantano or something, but it has our name on it. And anyway, so my great grandfather, who was the one who started all of that, he wrote he wrote a book one time. This is 19th century. He wrote a book one time, and he said in this book, it was like a fantasy book, and he wrote a book one time about how pirates came into Sabana Grande through the river there. I forgot the name of the river, and they got real close to Laguna Canto. Of course, it's impossible. There's no way that pirates could have gotten there because that laguna was the size of
It's
a
so
you know
small, yeah.
of a swimming pool. But he wrote this book, and apparently it was sold quite a bit. Sold quite a bit,
That's
and so he wrote about these fantasies. So I I would just love to go back and see that where my parents got married. All of those photos of Ciudad de Avila that I remember hearing about. Uh, Parque Parque Martí. You remember that parque, right? Parque
yeah.
Martí in Ciudad de Avila, because you
So
remember that.
for you, it's gonna be like that famous quote of Jose Marti, which is for the audience that doesn't know, it's like our national prócer or
Yes,
hero in Cuba. I don't know if you remember that when he came into exile to the United
right.
States too, and in
Oh,
an
it's one about the
interview,
beach.
a journalist asked him if he would go to Cuba after the the government, the president that was persecuting him back then, would change, and he said, "En la cáscara de una nuez." That's it's
Ah,
written in one of his interviews. So that's it's. I think it's Silvio. It's very common for all of us exiles and refugees to have the same mindset. It's the same with me and
right,
my family. I simply
right,
refuse to go back and keep putting my hard-earned money in the pockets of a communist dictatorship that
right.
forced me to escape and to leave and to start my entire life in a new country, in a new society, with a new language, with $200 in my pocket, like I've told you before, and my entire life stuffed in only two suitcases. So, no,
Right.
I would not do it until that changes. But, like I said, when we first started talking, what a time to be alive. Because if somebody would
It
have
is.
told me 3 years ago that we were going to see the change, the beginning of the change in Venezuela, and the
Right,
potential of finally Cuba getting rid of this, of the bloody murder
right.
communist dictatorship that has been killing us for 67 years, was going to be so close, I probably would have not believed you. And yet
No,
here
I
we
agree.
are.
I agree with you. Anyway, and all the changes that we've seen in Latin America that we've talked about already, that is also fascinating. But you just reminded me of something about Jose Marti. My father had this little office in our house, where he would play chess, and my father was a huge fan of chess,
Oh,
ajedrez. Oh, I mean, a huge fan. And his favorite chess master was, of course, Jose Ramon Capablanca, who was the great Cuban chess
the greatest Cuban chess
master.
player. Yeah.
Yes, and he had all kinds of books. And on the wall, with all the pictures of Ciego de Avila and Chabola Grande and their wedding picture and our baby pictures, all the stuff that fathers usually have on the wall. There was one in particular that always caught my attention. And it had a one it was like a 1 peso bill with Jose Marti on it, the old Cuban bill that he
The
had
old
on
one.
there. And then there was a phrase of Jose Marti that said that the beaches of the outside of Cuba, the beaches are never more beautiful as until you say goodbye to them or something like that. Las playas del exterior, something like that he wrote. And I had my father explain that to me one time. And when my father passed away, that particular portrait, uh, we didn't want to, we saved it because I had seen it so many times in my life. I can't tell you.
Yeah, it's part of the family history now.
It is. And I know it's an emotional topic, but we'll We'll talk again, and I apologize to you and
Good
to the
things are
audience for
coming. Good things are
good
coming
things
to
are
us.
coming,
It
especially
is not
especially
gonna
to
be an
my.
easy ride, but it's gonna be the right path to
You're
see
right.
our
No, a lot
countries
of good
free.
things are coming, and I'm so fortunate
Yes.
to have met you, and that we have a chance to talk about these things. And good things are coming. Good things are
Same.
coming.
Yes.
I
It's
just hope
such a
that I can
pleasure
get
to
rid of.
always join you. I hope you feel better. I know it's really bad to having to
Oh,
be
it's just
talking and all that when you are sick, but I really appreciate the invitation, the opportunity that we could sit down and unpack a little bit, probably just like only like a
well,
few layers of the onion of everything that is rapidly happening around us in Latin America, especially with what is going on in Venezuela. But hopefully, we can sit down and talk about this again and have even more better news to share with the audience. I truly hope so.
yes, yes. Oh, the other have to tell you this because you'll know this one. In Ciego de Avila, they had this place where you would go up and come down. It's on the La Carretera Central. There was like as you were there was like the carretera would go over the city,
Uh-huh.
and and I don't know if you remember that from your memory of Ciego de Avila, but my brother, my cousin, and I would get on the top of it and come down with our bicycles, and
Oh.
that was probably not a very smart thing to do, but
Probably it's the same
kids just
road, and the same is the same road that is
um,
still there because nothing has changed too much in 60 years.
no,
So,
no,
but it's
no,
probably
nothing. So
there.
it's still there. It's still there. Elevados, that's what they were called. Los
Los
elevados. That's
elevados,
what they
yeah,
were.
uh-huh.
Yeah, that's what
It's
they were
like
called.
the not the underpass, but like the upper passes
The
that they do in the
overpass.
highways here, like
Yeah,
the
it went over the
overpasses, something
city.
like
It
that, but
literally
in a smaller size. Yeah.
in smaller size, but they look pretty big to me when I was there.
Yeah, I mean, in our
All
memories
right.
as children, all those things always look big, but yeah, it was really a pleasure to sit down and talk a little bit about this. I'm gonna be looking forward
Yeah,
to
same
read your
here.
article tomorrow. I have a couple
Yes.
that I have in draft too, but again, everything is just moving so fast that whatever idea we want to put out there for our
Right.
fellow
Yeah.
Americans to read and inform themselves about, it has to be really fast, and it's changing very rapidly. But
Well,
other than that,
check out American Thinker tomorrow. Yeah, check out
I
American
will, and
Thinker tomorrow.
definitely a last
Or actually,
message
I,
for our
I'm
Venezuelan
going to put
brothers
it
and
on.
sisters.
I'll
We
put
are
it on.
celebrating
Yeah.
with them from the distance. Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
Yes. Yes. And it also will go up on X sometime in the morning,
Okay,
so you'll be able to
that's
see it
good.
there,
Well,
just
thank
like
you
this one
so
is
much
going up on
again.
X. Oh, thank you very much,
Great.
Mailyn. It's
It
always a
was
great
great
pleasure
to
to have
see
you.
you.
You know,
Thank you,
we
everybody.
miss you here. We miss you here in the Breakfast Club. We miss you. So
I
come to
know
Dallas.
Texas is calling my name. I need to make it happen.
Yes. Everybody's always asking about you and say, "Oh, when, like, cuando viene la cubanita?" I said, "Well,
Now
she'll
for the
come.
new
She'll come
year,
one
I
of
got
these."
a plan. Yeah, I got a plan, a little trip
Oh,
to
well, when
Texas
you
so we
come, you
can
know
have a
where you
little
can have
reunion.
breakfast. Yeah, you
Yes,
know where you can eat breakfast with us. Thank you so much. Have a great
absolutely.
day.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Well, our good friend Mailyn Salabarria, great Cuban lady who always has a lot of interesting things to say. And as I mentioned at the beginning, she and I come from different generations of Cuba. Her generation was really experienced much more of what they call the revolution than mine did. I left with my parents, and so it was a different experience. But so I enjoyed talking to her and people who had her experience a great deal. But things are going to happen in Cuba. So stay tuned. Change is coming. And once again, forgive me for my voice and my coughing. Thanks to this little mute button here that so I wasn't coughing into the microphone. But I really wanted to do this conversation tonight with Mailyn because things are happening in Cuba and it's coming. The change is coming, and you'll be able to see it. I only, as I mentioned, my parents. We used to talk about this all the time with my parents. So they're not, they're not going to get to see it, but I'm sure that up in heaven they will be cheering with lots of other Cubans up there of their generation. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye bye, everybody.